Davy D. Jones was an ancient king of the One Piece world, the ancestor of Blackbeard and Xebec, and apparently, Emo also really hates the guy. And I do think that Davy Jones might actually be no one other than Nika himself. Yep, seriously. And there's actually tons of evidence if you really look deeper into Xebec, Teach, and the Darkness Fruit, and really everything that Oda has given us in recent chapters. So today I want to show you why I'm thinking this, how so many different things are really backing it up apparently, and what that will eventually mean for Blackbeard and Luffy during the final saga. Now you might think that this is absolutely crazy at first. I mean, I know I did when it first popped into my head, but as I thought about it more and more, I seriously think that there is so much here that will make you also rethink hopefully everything you think you knew about Blackbeard and his daddy Xebec. So I'm gonna ask you, just for today, to kind of toss away all your preconceived notions about who all these ancient One Piece figures really were, everything that you feel like you know. Trust me, I know it's very easy to let other theories in your own headcanon inform your biases, but let's just wipe everything clean and start fresh here. At least until you finish this video. And instead I really want to build this new idea together with you, because I really do think it's worth exploring so much, since it would just change everything in the story if it turned out to be true. So the first big hint to me is the statement that Xebec made while resisting the Domi Reversi powers in chapter 1164. In the chapter, Xebec proudly states that Davy D. Jones was a former king of the world, something that Emu, well, kind of confirms, kind of denies. He kind of says, you know, like he was never king. And over the course of the God Valley flashback, we've also learned that Xebec is part of his bloodline, which is why he looks like him, at least in Emu's eyes. Or there's at least something about him that Emu just associates with Davy Jones. We now also know that Emu clearly has some very serious beef with Davy Jones, as Xebec constantly states his name, and just looking like him makes Emu angry all by itself. And again, honestly, it's probably this entire hockey and vibe thing that reek of Davy from Xebec. I mean, I heard he smells like moist fungus personally, but seriously, Emu is giving some very serious Dio Brando energy with this hatred of bloodlines, if you get my drift and watch JoJo's. I mean, first it was Joy Boy, and now Emu's got beef with Davy Jones, who, as this chapter seems to finally confirm, are two separate people after all. At least the way that Xebec is talking about the two here. But obviously, at first glance, this seems to raise some potential contradictions right out of the gate. Because how could a true king of the world, who was once king of the world, be Nika, the Great Liberator? I mean, Nika is supposed to be the sun god and warrior of liberation, who was told to free the slaves from the Earth God in the first One Piece worlds. And yes, we of course learn about this in chapter 1138. Now, during the first world in the big mural, which again pops up everywhere, it really seems like the king-like figure has enslaved the people of this super advanced ancient world. And to me at least, it seems like Nika appeared to defeat this king based on how the Harley text was written. So, if that's the case, how could that king here be Davy Jones and then also be Nika? Well, for starters, a big thing is that we do know that king doesn't always mean that of a kingdom. After all, king of the pirates is the person who is the most free, but is also called a king nonetheless, even though they're not really ruling over anything. So maybe Davy wasn't the king of a country, but the king in a much different, more metaphorical sense, which also would explain why Emu said no, they were never king of the world in that sense as they are right now. And while I actually think that the true nature of Xebec's words is meant as a piercing jab to Emu personally. As a result, I don't think that Davy D. Jones was actually the man who ruled the world as, you know, a government, but the man who was regarded as the true king of the world in a more symbolic fashion. And I really think that this is backed up by Emu's statement here acknowledging Davy Jones, but also the statement around him never being true king. It doesn't really matter to them anymore, also because, you know, he's not here anymore. But when you really think about it all together, this is like every single One Piece arc in general, right? Like, Dressrosa and Alabasta specifically have to do with the true king being replaced by a usurper. So is Davy Jones a Cobra-like figure while Joy Boy was the one beating up the usurper? That could be a very interesting idea connecting the first and second One Piece worlds. And I think that this idea only compounds more and more after learning that Davy D. Xebec has a will that Emu is actually scared of. Xebec just casually talks about the will of Davy, which might just be what the will of D straight up is at this point, right? Which could mean that his name is Davy Davy Jones, or more likely his initial is something absolutely else, and the D is the will of Davy in name form. And you know, the D still stands for something else, whatever it may be. But that's still not confirmed just yet anyways, and I do know that people have long theorized that the D were those who were connected with Joy Boy, but at this point in the story, I personally definitely think that Joy Boy himself may have actually just also been a D-clan member himself, and that Davy D Jones was the OG of the entire clan. And what this basically means is that I think that the will of D and the D clan actually, you know, go back way further in time than just Avoid Sentry and Joy Boy, but all the way to the first worlds. Though of course this is definitely far from being confirmed or the only option out there, especially because we've never seen Joy Boy stylized with a D or in general a full name. Who knows if he's even called Joy Boy? And there's a chance that because he has an initial, Davy D Jones is inherently implied to be not the originator, since he does actually carry the will of D himself. Now, of course, this leads us dangerously close to a will of D theory, but for today, all this really makes me think about is that Davy is a man who became king after freeing the enslaved people of the first worlds. But then, because of the world being, you know, consumed by death and darkness, as the Harley says, he never was actually able to act on his own power that he gained. Presumably, at least, because Super Salty Emu right here raged out after losing to Davy, and that's what led to the end of the First World, their big war. So yeah, we're dealing with some crazy stuff now, and it's super clear that Xebec knew just so much more than anyone else in the world. But what really blows my mind with this is just how casually and confidently Xebec says this stuff to Emu, and despite Emu's best efforts, they're getting absolutely rattled. Which honestly, at this point, come to think of it, is literally their reaction to kind of almost everything. Like, my dude here gets shaken a lot, but particularly whenever he feels Davy Jones or Joy Boy are involved. And at this point, Emu really gives you like non-human or child energy, like throwing a tantrum all the time. But also the reaction kind of makes sense when you look at Xebec's story and the way that he's actually talking to people. I mean, he's just slinging insults like it's nobody's business. He literally kicked down the doors to heaven itself just to shit-talk Emu. He knew he couldn't do anything about it, to their face, or lack of face. Stupid Emu. Anyhow, Xebec seems to be a dude focused on toppling Emu over anything else. He doesn't seem like he's actually trying to conquer the world or anything and rule over everything, but actually it just seems like he's trying to remove this false King Emu from the empty throne and, you know, restructure the world. Both of them very clearly do know what truly happened in the past, and my current train of thought is this. Davy D Jones was hailed as the original sun god. He might have been the man whom the people called upon, the man who stalemated Emu, the earth god, and the reason that Emu was hailed as the earth god, or the king of the world, was because they were the ones who touched the forbidden sun and became like a god, as the first world of the Harley text does describe. Now, something else I found really interesting that builds on that is that there's another figure that's being talked about by Emu during the exchange between them and Xebec. Emu uses the word Nushia. Now, I was trying to figure out what that could be. I know Emu has used it in the past ones before at least, but looking into it and even talking about it with some Japanese people, like, this is not a Japanese word or like, you know, like a way that you would even address someone in Japanese. It could just be a made-up word that Emu is using to kind of like show that they're not human, or maybe they're actually talking about a different person here. Like, I mean, it does kind of sound like they're talking about maybe Zunisha, but again, I feel like the timelines here don't really add up if that's the case, if Davy actually predates Joy Boy. Though to be fair, this thing here that the king is standing on in the first world could be Zunisha. It looks a bit like an elephant. So I don't know, maybe they're talking about an ancestor of Zunisha instead. But the way that this is written in Japanese, it could also be a play on the word Nushi, which means guardian spirit or great master, which again might suggest that Emu's just talking about himself or about others, addressing them like you, or it might mean that there is maybe a master above Emu, or what I really think could be the case is that Nushi is referring to the serpent of Hellflame potentially, which is definitely giving off big Earth Guardian vibes to me. So I'm really curious to see how that one unravels in the coming weeks and if there's gonna be like a proper explanation, because the Japanese just doesn't really give us anything. It's not a real word. Regardless though, this exchange between Emu and Xebec gives me a lot more first world of One Piece vibes as opposed to the more second world Joy Boy era, right? And also that Xebec's statement is him essentially asking Emu which of their great enemies was worse, Davy D Jones in the first world or Joy Boy in the II, which I believe is actually the biggest hint that Zebek is calling Davy D. Jones Emu's enemy during the first world and Joy Boy their enemy during the second world, and in turn, as I've been saying, Davy D. Jones could then be Nika. And I apologize for this getting a little bit complicated. I hope you got the idea somewhat and the stuff from the recent chapters that have led me to believe this conclusion potentially. I think we should continue with answering the next question though, that is maybe even more important. What other things are, adding to the idea that Davy D. Jones might have been Nika? Because it'll be really important to know the depth of this claim before then shifting into the modern era and the story and kind of trying to predict what that could mean. So let's stay in the evidence area for now. A big one for me, for example, is that Zebek is an opposite to Roger specifically. Roger, of course, a man who seems to be way more intertwined with Joy Boy's legacy than probably anyone else. The best way, of course, to tell that is the straw hat, a literal symbol that we do know connects Roger and then Joy Boy. So Joy Boy is tied to Roger, Shanks, and Luffy through the hat specifically, but Zebek, well, he doesn't have one, but still seems pretty fixated on all this big ancient history stuff. He clearly knows a lot more than anyone else. Which kinda makes me think that the era predating the Straw Hat is what he's focused on a lot more. The era of Nika, a character we have actually never seen associated with the Straw Hat specifically, unless you think that the Straw Hat inside of Emu's freezer is actually Nika's, but I think it's much more likely that it is Joy Boy's. So, back to Nika. Something I think is super crucial to my argument today is the idea that the Sun God is both a liberator and a destroyer in the eyes of the Elbafians. And I really actually don't think that the community has focused enough on the fact that Zebek, loves Elbaf. The dude is like an Elbafian gaijin, super nerd. He's all about Harold. Zebek raves about a special fruit that's located there and the ancient giants of the Galela, not to mention he would literally go there to drink and hang out with Harold and his son. Don't forget we're technically still in Loki's and Harold's flashback here. They haven't appeared in a while, but we're hopefully gonna get back to them. Anyways, Zebek is full-on Elbaf-filed, and Elbaf worships Nika like it's no one else's business, of course. And this kind of dual role that Nika has in Elbaf, a person who is both crazy and destructive, but also liberates those who are in need, kind of ties really closely into what Zebek and Teach both do too. They are all about freedom, and Zebek himself literally raided the Holy Land, enabling slaves to escape during chapter 1155, and Zebek and his son are both all about freedom and dreams, of course. They do destroy those in their way, using force to solve their problems, but not always in a malicious way. Both of them have, of course, ruled over Hachinosu, creating this dog-eats-dog world that really focused on anyone being able to do anything, and most importantly, the strongest do as they will in that type of world that they want to create. By the way, if you're still doubtful that Teach also actually embodies this freedom element, remember that he literally released a ton of prisoners from the world government. I mean, like it or not, that's the truest form of liberation, just in this case also for some of the bad guys. And so I really think we're starting to see a through line here that helps back up my claim of Davy being connected to Nika. Davy Jones' descendants are tied to places that worship Nika. They have adopted a similar view of people in the world as destructive, chaotic liberators, which actually does seem to work surprisingly well with the entire concept of Davy backfights when you really think about it. Because Davy backfights, which I feel like kind of have to be named after Davy D. Jones himself, are all about using charisma and power to recruit allies. It's a pact, almost like something you'd make with an otherworldly entity, right? Davy backfights might actually get their name and concept from the events of the first world of One Piece. Maybe that's even how this Nushia, figure comes into play too. And I really actually love the idea that Davy Jones as Nika was just so good at winning the hearts of people that this epic and legendary way of recruiting comrades was created in his honor as like a sort of festival. That's why Davy Jones might be called the originator of these games, since it might have been how he started the big slave uprising in the first place too. And when it comes to a weird level of God connection, Zebek was also just revealed to have one of the most insane powers, the voice of all things. Probably, right? An ability that not only lets him hear the souls of things and people, but apparently, as with everything else, Zebek is just built different from the rest and can use it actively to speak directly to others in their minds. Something that so far we've only ever seen Momonosuke do with Zunisha, and Zunisha do with, well, Momonosuke and maybe Luffy. And yes, Luffy's voice has accidentally been heard by other people, but Zebek quite literally implants his own thoughts into Roger's and Garp's minds, which I really need to make a video on because I'm kind of starting to suspect that this actually might just be a D-Clan thing as well, which would open some really cool doors, potentially for the Kozuki to be D-Clan members too, which, come on, would make so much sense. But let's really face it for now. I do feel like I don't need to convince you that Zebek is some, like, godly beast of a fighter, because we've seen it in action quite a lot, even though Oda tries to still somehow hide his true powers from us. But the guy here is literally on a whole different level from just about everyone else we've ever seen in the story. Before he got Domi reversied into next Tuesday, he was already casually defeating some of the strongest people in the entire universe. He made some of the greatest pirates in the world bend the knee to him, commanded utter respect from everyone, and casually killed a Marine Admiral while probably not even trying to do that. The guy just died from his wounds. He also destroyed one of the massive gates of justice, which still is a crazy thing to think about, sliced an Elbaf mountain in half like butter, and made everyone on God Valley look like an absolute chump. So I don't think it's too crazy to think that he's an actual descendant of the Sun God with feats like the one we're seeing, especially after he got his sick, nasty devil wings and darkness cape. His power was just through the roof. He one-shotted Kaido with a punch into a mountain, cleaves Big Mom like he's Sukuna, and then destroys one half of the God Valley mountain in his crazy clash with Whitebeard. Shout out to Whitebeard though. He really, proving that he's just the GOAT. No wonder then that Garp and Roger had to team up to put him out of his misery, right? Plus, if he is a liberator and a descendant of the Sun God, it just adds a whole different poetic level to having his own freedom stripped away by Imu. Alright, but now one of my biggest pieces of evidence for the idea that Davy Jones is actually Nika is the subtle possibility that Nika is not the real Sun God according to the Harley text. If you're someone who's watching my theories, you know what's coming next. Because as it turns out, in chapter 1138, the big chapter, during the first world description in the Harley, the title Sun God is actually written in quotation marks. All the other gods are written regularly, but the Sun God, even in Japanese, is written like this, the Sun God, which might actually mean that it's a false attribution, which actually just makes a bunch of sense regardless of if you believe that Davy Jones is or is not Nika, since Nika's powers really have nothing to do with the sun itself. So instead, my train of thought is that Davy D. Jones is the Sun God because he protected or took away the forbidden sun from Imu during the First World, which would explain why Nika's powers don't actually seem to reflect the sun and more so the act of bringing about the new dawn through force. Because in this case, the sun is much more metaphorical rather than literal. I really think that's something I want to dig into a lot more. I've talked about Nika, his deeper connections to Zebek, and how these powers don't really line up. That's why I think that it's actually fairly likely that Davy D. Jones is Nika, but what if I told you that it's even deeper than just that? Okay, so get this. I actually have a pretty good idea of what Nika's true powers might have been, and it's all thanks to Blackbeard, which then will in turn make my argument that Davy is Nika even stronger than before, I think. And not only that, it might even reveal what Oda's bigger plans for Luffy and Blackbeard during the final saga might actually be, different from what we all thought. So, let's talk Blackbeard. Marshall D. Teach, Davy D. Teach, who knows? The man here isn't just your average pirate, of course. He's the son of the world's worst and strongest pirate, but what I really want to lock in on here is his use of his devil fruit, the Yami Yami no Mi. Because according to Dr. Vegapunk, devil fruits aren't just random powers, they're literally dreams made into reality. Because according to Dr. Vegapunk, devil fruits aren't just random powers, they're literally people's dreams made real. That's his theory at least. And they do seem to find their way into the hands of those whose dreams align best with the will of the fruit. Blackbeard actually even says that in chapter 441 to Ace after eating the darkness fruit. He proudly claims that the devil fruit chose him, the one chooses the wizard, and this kind of makes me think that his will and dreams, the will of his father, which also has now been revealed to be the will of Davy Jones, is much, much more important. So what's up with Blackbeard's dream and will? Well, as you know, Blackbeard talks about dreams like a lot. Actually, he's super comparable to Luffy in many ways. Like, their first interaction led to the famous Blackbeard line about how people's dreams never die. And so I do think that we should punch in on that very thing. What could that really mean? Because I like to think that we found out during his fight with Ace what Blackbeard's dream actually originally was, and we really never realized how on the nose Oda was with this. Because get this, my sweet little prince who's watching this video, the signature move that Blackbeard used to defeat Ace was aptly called Liberation. Huh! Now, will you look at that? Blackbeard, not Luffy, is being associated with the concept and a move named Liberation. I don't know, it's almost as if Luffy is more similar to Joy Boy and Blackbeard is following his bloodline's true goal, liberation back to Nika. And don't get it twisted here, it's pretty clear to me that this is what Oda is very much going for here, because the kanji for the darkness move, Liberation, Kaiho, is the very same Kaiho, the same kanji in Japanese, used for the sun god Nika, the warrior of liberation, Kaiho no Senshi. That's right, Nika, the mysterious, legendary figure tied to freedom, laughter, and all the lore we're still piecing together. Suddenly, liberation isn't just a name given to symbolize Teach's goal, it might actually be the first hint we got to his special bloodline, paying homage here to his real ancestor, the warrior of liberation himself, Davy D. Jones. Don't worry though, there is so much more yet to talk about. Do you think that was gonna just give you one fun thread on how Teach uses a move and then call it quits? No shot, dude. I think I figured out why Blackbeard was specifically hunting for the darkness fruit as well, because I think it also ties into the idea that he's the descendant of Davy Jones. Because after rereading the entire Ace fight recently in Japanese, I realized that something got pretty badly mistranslated in the official English version. While he's duking it out with Ace, Blackbeard says that his devil fruit can absorb the power of other devil fruits. We obviously already knew that because he'd already kind of alluded to it and literally just absorbed Ace's flames. But actually, here's the big twist, that's not what he really says in Japanese at all. Teach doesn't say devil fruit powers, which would be Akuma no Mi in Japanese, classic English error, no. Instead, the Japanese actually just states that Teach has the ability to straight up absorb the power of a devil, or the power of the devil. And I think that's the moment that everything really clicked for me, right? I've had discussions with, the rest of my team and other theorists before about the weird similarities between the Nika fruit and the darkness fruit. I mean, come on, they look very scarily similar, right? And so a theory that I've always thought was very fun, or at least likely, was that Teach knew what the outside of the fruit that he was looking for was and just got the two fruits confused. As in Teach was actually hunting for the Nika fruit, but accidentally got the darkness fruit and thinks everything is all good, when ironically, we the audience know that Luffy has the real Nika fruit. Maybe you've heard about that theory too, but what if that's not true actually? What if Teach knew much better than anyone that the darkness fruit was the fruit he really wanted, since it did hold the actual powers of Davy D. Jones, the powers of darkness. The very powers we saw written about in the Harley text about the first world. The ability to shroud the world in death and darkness, as it quite literally says. And even more importantly, the power to defeat the devil Emu. Now, the last part feels a little bit weird, right? Darkness being the power of the sun god just feels somewhat off, but get this. There's actually an even more on-the-nose way for this darkness power to be, yes, very much tied to a sun god. Let's geek out together for a second here, shall we? Blackbeard uses the move, very famously, Black Hole, and then he follows it up with Liberation. Funnily enough, that's what happens to me after I drink my morning coffee. Plus, he's always talking about his infinite gravity darkness, which does line up with the name Black Hole and the absorption powers that give everything that good, dirty, and nasty suck. But the explanation for how it ties to Nika is actually science. Like, right, black holes don't just appear, they do form, at least we think they form, when massive stars actually collapse in on themselves. That means that Teach's power literally mirrors a cosmic process: destruction, collapse, and rebirth. His fruit is quite literally a microcosm of the life of a star. And a star, aka a sun, collapses into a black hole represented by Teach's darkness. Then Liberation releases all that supercondensed energy and material, almost like some sort of controlled supernova, right? And I have this sneaky suspicion that Oda actually found a way to turn astrophysics into a fighting style, and I'm all here for it. And tying it into the Forbidden Sun, that ancient object of power, could quite literally be the star that his powers now echo. Now, I've actually talked about the idea before, implying that maybe the planet, the One Piece planet, was straight up built around a star, like the science fiction concept of a Dyson sphere, which is basically just a massive science fiction megastructure built around a star to absorb all its energy. But this through line of Teach to Davy Jones and the Darkness Fruit to the Sun God really, I think, helps bridge science and mythology at the same time, which actually would line up really well with all of the first world stuff that we do see, since the mural paints it out to be a super technologically advanced society, right? We do know that the Void Century was as well, so these big world-ending events might just have been a natural order thing. When humanity gets too tech-savvy, the world gets wiped out. And maybe we've also been getting it wrong in general timeline-wise, because I think that we, or at least I, really tend to conflate the Void Century with ancient history. I mean, the Void Century might not have been the most advanced since it was only about 800 or 900 years ago, and Vegapunk states that Emeth and the lab on Elbaf are actually way older than the Void Century. So it does seem like maybe the super tech-heavy society was actually the first world, not the second, and the second might have just been like really advanced to the modern era still, or more, magic based, with devil fruits and stuff, which is kind of implied in the mural too. I mean, I seriously think that this makes a lot of sense, right? The Yami Yami no Mi isn't just about pure darkness or destruction, it might actually be one of two fruits designed to fight something godlike. And this feels especially likely now because Rox was specifically looking for two devil fruits, not just one, and since they are manifestations of dreams, they're probably a super advanced technologically engineered thing that allows people to use the powers that they want. Which I think makes sense narratively too. If devil fruits are dreams and they line up with the dream of their user, then Blackbeard's dream might literally be defeating the devil itself, and suddenly all this chaos and all this betrayals and all his power grabbing stuff does, make a lot of sense suddenly. He's not just a big dog who scares all the women, he's literally preparing to fight the devil itself with the power of liberation. And again, I know that this seems silly at first because Luffy has that fruit. Vegapunk literally says that Luffy has the powers of the rubbery god of liberation, and yes, there's definitely a likely chance that instead Davy's darkness powers are tied to the Hellflame Serpent or some other weird power to defeat Emu. Heck, the darkness fruit might have just been a fruit created from the dreams of someone who wanted to have powers like Emu, but I really think there's a world where it's actually the other way around. And funnily enough, it doesn't actually contradict what Vegapunk states at all when he describes Luffy as Nika. I think you'd be in the right to go, Manu, this can't be. Vegapunk's statement dismantles your idea because he says that Luffy is Nika and Blackbeard doesn't have the rubbery body and white hair, which I totally get. I think that's a totally valid knock towards this theory overall. It's what I would have said if it was, but it isn't, because Vegapunk's theory on devil fruits can be used to explain Luffy's powers being Nika's powers, and that Blackbeard's powers are also Nika's powers. Because hey, technically I never said that Luffy wasn't also using Nika powers, just that Blackbeard might be doing the same thing. Blackbeard's fruit and Luffy's fruits might both be Nika fruits, just two different halves of the Sun God's original powers. Think about it. If devil fruits are the dreams of the ancient people from the Void Century or even before, and Nika is seen as both the rubbery fool and a god of destruction, I think there's a good chance that both fruits might represent different aspects of Nika. Two sides of the same coin. You know, Oda loves that stuff. Blackbeard and Luffy are already so similar and yet so different, same side of the same coin. You get the idea, right? The rubbery goofy powers, those ones are in the human fruit model Nika, and then the darkness fruit could have been created from the dream of someone looking to harness the power of the fallen forbidden sun that Davy D. Jones may have used to shroud the world in death and darkness, which again might have quite literally been a star collapsing and turning into a black hole. Now just to warn you, before I go and shroud the world in death and darkness, why not consider joining the Ohara Patreon instead? Like if you don't, it's cool too. I won't actually go through with the evil plans yet. After all, they might not even be evil. All I do know, it is very liberating to consume all of the bonus content I put up on Patreon. Just saying, go check it out. We have a free weekly newsletter too. Circling back to the Davy Jones having two powers point here, I do think this also really lines up well with what we already know about Blackbeard. Because this might just be what various characters meant when they described Teach's body as being unique. It's apparently tied to his lineage, so maybe this is a Davy thing. Maybe Davy D. Jones was able to eat two devil fruits thanks to his naturally rubbery body or something, assuming that devil fruits have been around for that long. And as a result, the legends told about him as the sun god Nika were unclear since he used both his rubbery body with the white hair and stuff, as well as his dark void-like powers too. Random thought also, this might explain why some of the Hagaromos, which are those cloud scarves that appear around awakened devil fruit users, actually come in two colors, black and white. I mean, both might represent different halves of Nika, different halves of the original sun god, who might have played some part in devil fruit creation in general. You know, a little bit of yin and yang action, like I brought up in my recent Big Bagua theory, in case you haven't watched that one. Really should check that one out. I didn't even know how to package it. It's just a really fun, big, crazy theory. Recommend it. Anyways, you know, like the wholesome, good defender type of people who have devil fruits, they might represent the Warrior of Liberation part with the white, pure scarf, Luffy, Yamato, and then the destructive, more chaotic tendencies, those fruits awaken with the black scarves, like Lucci or the Gorosei, which actually sets up a perfect wombo combo too for Teach and Luffy to defeat Imu together. Taking it all back to the beginning of this video when I talked about the legacy of Davy and Joy Boy. They are, as we now know, two different figures. They both represent two different halves of liberation. Luffy is the rubbery god, the fool that Vegapunk described as bringing joy and smiles to everyone around him. He's just a spitting image of Joy Boy apparently, and Nika's light powers. Meanwhile, Teach could be the dark half, the actual descendant of Davy D. Jones, the original Nika. His destructive nature, his ambition, and the darkness that he wields can counteract the devil himself, giving Luffy the ability to override Imu's immense powers. Blackbeard and Luffy actually might end up teaming up, not the first time I mentioned this by the way, during one of the craziest fights in the series' history, and I actually love this possible outcome so much. We get Luffy versus Blackbeard on, you know, Laugh Tale, they clash and everything, and then they actually need to team up. And I do think there's actually a lot of credence to this idea too, because Oda claimed that there are plans for a creature similar to Todd Musica from film Red to at some point appear in the main story, but that might not necessarily mean the creature itself, but the method of defeating it being what Oda meant here to begin with, because in the movie, Shanks and Luffy have to team up to beat the beast in two different dimensions at the same time. Imu might be the same case where Blackbeard could fight Imu in the Abyss while Luffy fights in the real world. Also, another possibility, random thought I just had, maybe it's that Davy Jones isn't Nika, but Davy Jones and Nika are both versions of Nika, maybe both inherited Nika's will or something, and you know, one was good, the other was bad, they both turned into fruits, but they both connect back to Nika that way, and maybe that's why both Joy Boy and Davy Jones are two people connected though both to the sun god. And that's just that, man. Like, it's a possibility, right? There's stuff that backs this idea up, I think, and stuff that might, run counter to it. And that's kind of the beauty of theory talk overall. There are so many ways that this could all go, and I do love discussing all the other ways it could work too. Because Nika and Davy may also be completely different people. Like, maybe Davy is the king on the mural, and his darkness fruit powers are actually tied to the Hellflame Serpent. That's one option. Or Davy might just have been a contemporary of Joy Boy, as we talked about, or somewhere between Nika and Joy Boy. Like, maybe Joy Boy set sail from Davy's kingdom during the Void Century, and the two of them clashed as rivals, but Emu acted as a powerful third-party figure and caused the big war. It's another option. Or what if Emu captured Davy Jones and is drawing power directly from him? That could explain the darkness and weird abyss powers, as well as Zebek using the Pandemonium Abyss / wild attack name, by the way. And if you want to know more about that specifically, you should click on this video right here where I break everything down. Be warned though, it does get a little bit spooky. Even though Halloween was 2 days ago, still counts, I think. With that being said, thanks for watching, thanks to all of our great Patreons, and I'll see you on Tuesday for one of my favorite theories I've ever created about the true meaning of the Straw Hat. You don't want to miss that one.